Hi, welcome to my front porch at Cold Spring Farm. Today I want to show you this product. It's called Maudie's Super Squash Scooper. And we sell it right here behind me in our farm stand, 7 days a week, year round. It comes in really cool colors, orange and green and red. So you can start using it in the fall with your squashes. You can use it all winter with your winter squashes. And they're super fun, independently owned company, locally made in Wiscasset, Maine, so right here in New England. And they're even kid friendly. They don't have a very sharp edge, but it's just sharp enough to do all of your scooping in a very simple handheld way. So these are mine from my kitchen drawer, and because I couldn't choose the color, I just took two. I've had them for many years and I love them. And with all of the squashes that we serve up on the farm, I thought this would be an ideal product to share with all of our customers, because we have people who come here all the time and say, how do I cook it? How do I bake it? How do I prepare it? How do I even open it up? And this just makes it a lot easier. So really, to use this, the only other tool you need is a knife, a very sharp one, and a cutting board. This was made by my husband, and we sell these in the winter, and he uses our barn workshop to produce all of these from local wood. This is a black walnut slab. So I'll be using this to demonstrate the different winter squashes that we can prepare. This one is super fun. This is a spaghetti squash. It's very popular. It may not last us all winter, but it is really easy to use the scooper to even do the shredding once you've opened it up. So just like any winter squash, or summer squash for that matter, it's super simple to be able to cut down the middle. You never want to cut from the stem side because it's very, very hard. This is where the stem attaches to the vine that grows on the ground. But if you flip the squash on its side, and you're able to start a mark with your knife and just kind of edge into it, because they're super roly-poly and slippery and you don't want to cut yourself. And once you have a line that goes down the mid section of the squash, you can kind of dig in a little bit with the blade of the knife. And I will say that I did sharpen this, but it's not super sharp, to be honest. So it's not too hard. This makes it a little harder. When you get down to the other side of the squash, you just want to tap it a little bit. Maybe not on a glass table. I'm working with what I have. So once you open it, and it does not have to be a perfect line, as this is not, you can see that inside both halves are a lot of seeds. And you can even see the pulp of the spaghetti squash, where the seeds have been cut in half, and there's a little bit of the peelings that are starting to come up. Well, all of this center stuff is perfectly edible for my chickens, but not as palatable for us. So I like to take my Maudie's Super Squash Scooper. Super cool, super fun name. I dare you to say it 10 times as fast as you can. Maybe it's a good kid activity. And you literally cut around the edge of its very center, where all of that pulp and all of those seeds are. And obviously holding it in your hand is definitely doable. And you're kind of twisting as you go, or that's what I'm doing. But you can also work from the cutting board, which gives you a harder surface. And what you want to do is just scrape it out into the bowl, and you'll see what's left to deal with. You want all the seeds out so there's no bitterness at all when it bakes. And now that I've done that, I mean, I don't know, that probably took 10, 15 seconds just because I'm a perfectionist. So with that, it's kind of addicting and really fun, and you're like, wait, I'm done already? So here's the hollowed section. And you can bake it just like this, flipped upside down in a baking dish with about 1 inch of water, maybe 1.5 inches. And when you have both sides flipped upside down with water in the basin, you can roast it at 400 degrees for 30 minutes. And when you take it out, you take your clean scooper back, and all of this will shred right up if you work from the outer shell of the spaghetti squash. So if you just take it along the lines and you scoop inward, you can fluff it all up, pour it into a bowl, or serve it right out of this. You can add your butter and your sea salt and any herbs or spices that you want, and it's done. So Beautiful thing. Super easy. There's no cuts on my hands. There's been no take twos so far. So on that note, I have an acorn squash, and these ones are a little bit harder to keep flat when you're cutting. But the beauty is of these that they have all of these deep ridges. So if you find a couple that work well together, you can hold it in place to keep it stable. So I've got to go back to using my knife again, and you'll see I'm not touching the stem. I'm not touching the butt end of this squash, but I do want to dig in a little bit toward the center. I want to try to ease into it. By the way, acorns can be a little bit harder, especially if they're fairly fresh, which is why when we have winter squashes, we usually let them sit for a couple weeks before we put them in the farm stand, just so they can start curing a little bit to make your life a little bit easier when it comes to food preparation. So now that I've gone through most of it and turned my knife as much as I can in the direction that I'm in, I can slide the knife around. I can also twist like you would an avocado. And now I have 2 halves of an acorn squash. And look at all that fun color. It's not quite as colorful as my handle, but it's close. So with this, it's a much smaller area than the spaghetti squash had, but this is still the perfect shape. Look how perfectly it fits in there. So I would just do this one over the bowl because it's hard to balance. And you just turn to fit the right size. Some of these are smaller, some of them are bigger. And you just kind of turn it on its side and you scoop out the seeds. Some people use a spoon at home, but this scooper really does everything. So if you have a little touch-up work to do, you can do that. You can use your hands. If you have a really small acorn squash, you want to do a combination of this just to make it work well. So then once you have that, you have a center. And one of my favorite things to do with this is to stuff it with our breakfast sausage and a little bit of maple syrup just to make it a little bit sweeter. Fresh herbs like sage and oregano, some parsley and thyme. And then also, like, you can use rice, you can use green peppers, you can use onions and garlic and stuff it full. You can even make like a breading out of some stale bread that you have. And then bake this in the oven with cheese over the top. And it's amazing when it comes out. So we have this. It's going to be easy to make dinner tonight. So then this squash is a butternut squash, and I did choose a smaller one. So we actually have different sizes of all of these squashes in the farm stand. We'll probably have them through at least March or April based on the way they're stored, and also just that we made sure we have a lot this year. So the butternut squashes too, depending. This is definitely a 2 or 3 person butternut squash, but there are much bigger ones, and I figured I wouldn't eat up all your time, so I chose a medium. So again, the butternut squash is very much rolling on my cutting board, so it's not exactly the safest way to cut through, but you do have to hold on to it. So I usually take the narrow end and I try to cut into it and lay it down as I do. And I've made that mark, and then I'll continue to cut as much as I can. But it does get a little tricky because it doesn't want to stay perfectly still. So I'll go all the way to the bottom and I'll try to cut like an avocado again. You can flip it over, you can cut through. And now what's cool about butternut squashes, as the seeds I'm finding in my hair, okay, you have 2 small areas of the butternut squash where all of the seeds are contained. So it's very similar to the acorn squash. It's just like that's the butt end of a butternut. It's really neat the way they grow. So smaller space could be used for a spoon, but you could also turn the scooper on its side and get all of that pith and all of those seeds out. And the seeds are a little bit smaller, so now this bowl is full of seeds that my chickens are going to love. Or just like pumpkin seeds, you can take them, clean them, put olive oil and sea salt and maybe a little bit of fresh rosemary on them and roast them in the oven and then eat them later. So I am making a little bit of a mess, but it is working to a certain extent. Just you have to kind of dig deep and use the cutting board as a balancing tool. And then you end up in the center. There's definitely a little more pith I could get. Some of it is small enough for a spoon. but you end up with another hollowed out section with this scooper. And I still, just for checking purposes, have no cuts. So it's actually simple enough that kids can use it, which makes it a really fun family event, especially if you want to make a big pot of soup or you want to stuff a pumpkin. This is the Carnival squash, and they vary in color scheme and size, but this is about the average size of one, and it's super colorful and fun. A lot like an acorn. It's actually related to an acorn squash, so you can see all of the ribbing that's involved in nature's design. So this one, you really can't find a flat spot, but this, at the stem end, is your best bet. So you could start from the top, if you feel safe doing that, depending on the squash, and cut straight down, as long as you don't lose it. And now I have two almost heart-shaped pieces from this one Carnival squash. Peekaboo. So then I take my semi-clean mod scooper and I will scrape out the inside of this. I'm literally just twisting while I hold it, just because that's how I like to do it. But again, you could use the cutting board as a tool for applying pressure and making it a very swift process. So again, we have a seedless, hollowed center to a Carnival squash. It's a little heart-shaped. So with that completed, I wanted to point out that there is a really great use for these squash scoopers that isn't commonly thought of. It's great for food year-round. You can even do this with summer squashes if you had an aversion to the seeds that are in the summer yellow squash and zucchinis. But I also have pumpkins. And it's a really fun activity to do with kids, but oftentimes the tools are really kind of too sharp or maybe too flimsy, a little bit dangerous. And so what you want to think about is like, how can we keep the kids safe and do something fun and have no cuts or be, banged up and bruised by the end of it. So these scoopers are a really great solution. And it's one of the reasons that we brought them into the farm stand at the time of year, which is now this beautiful fall day in October when families are doing this together. So we do have a lot of large pumpkins for sale on the farm for carving and making jack-o'-lanterns, and we'll definitely post some pictures of the designs that we do this year. But it is an annual tradition in the Harvest Barn to have a pumpkin carving contest. And this is a sugar pie pumpkin, which is awesome for making pumpkin pie and pumpkin soup, and pumpkin brownies and pumpkin muffins and everything pumpkin you can think of. But this is still a squash. It is a winter squash. It is in the Cucurbitaceae family, just like all of these winter squashes. And the cool thing about it is this is like the greatest size for a kid, especially a little kid. But sometimes they want to get into the big pumpkins because they have all the big guts and it's a lot of fun. So you can treat this either way. I'm going to treat it like a winter squash. And I would do the exact same thing with my scooper. With my knife. I would cut it down the center, and then I would split it in half. I'd roll it down, and I would have two open sections with all of the seeds visible. And then I would take my scooper in this much bigger crevice, and I would scoop out all the seeds and add them to my seed bowl, which is looking pretty festive right now. All of these seeds are edible as well, and they would love to be roasted with some sea salt and olive oil and whatever herbs and spices, or even just cinnamon, which makes them super kid-friendly. And if you are a fancy adult liking spicy contributions, you can add some cumin or you can add some hot pepper flakes to your cinnamon mix. So with that said, this Maudie's Super Squash Scooper, wow, I can't even say it once, is my very favorite tool for the fall and the winter and really all year round. And we do have them in the farm stand for at least the rest of this year. And we're really happy to support this awesome guy who makes them. So we hope you swing by and we hope you grab one of these while they're out and available. And they're really awesome stocking stuffers too. If you're thinking ahead to Christmas, the color schemes are perfect. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll talk to you guys soon. See you on the farm. So my name is Jess Stone, and I'm the owner of Cold Spring Farm, where food and nature grow together. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of them, hit the like button on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. What do you guys think of this scooper? We want you to buy it, we want you to use it, we want you to love it, and we want you to post about it. So tell us what you think.